Well, hello to the class. Welcome to Lecture 9 in our Prajnaparamita course. Today, I want to talk to you about a subdivision in the sutra which relates to the audience or the teaching. And the audience, as I mentioned at the end of the last lecture, are the gods, the devas. So let's go and see what was happening when the Prajnaparamita was being taught to devas. At the beginning of chapter 2, the audience suddenly shifts. Chapter 1 is the Buddha speaking just to the named arhats, Subhuti, Shariputra mainly. But then as chapter 2 opens, a whole new audience appears, a much larger audience. The speaker for this audience becomes Chakra. Chakra is a name which is tied to the ancient Indian god of Indra. Indra is tied to Brahma, and the two of them, Indra and Brahma, these ancient Indian deities, are perhaps in Buddhism best known for being the two who washed the young baby when the Buddha was born, when Shakyamuni was born. The two of them came and sent down streams of hot and cold water, a shower to wash off the baby. And of course, on Buddha's birthday, people still reenact that by bathing the baby Buddha. So Chakra, this important, the Lord of the gods, the Lord of the devas, no less, comes down and he speaks to Subhuti. He doesn't speak to Shariputra. He doesn't speak to the Buddha. He starts off speaking to Subhuti. And he says to Subhuti, I brought with me this great assembly of gods, countless, millions of them, gathered and assembled together. And they want to hear Subhuti teach the meaning of Prajnaparamita. This is a significant statement. Why would these divinities, these powerful divinities, come down and ask a human, ask an arhat, Subhuti, to teach them something, anything? You would think that with their great glory, they would know it all anyway, but they don't. In the text, they come and they ask to be taught. So this was a method, I think, of saying that the Prajnaparamita teaching is different from the ancient teachings that the devas represent. It's different than the teachings which are associated with Indra and Brahma. This is an innovation. And the gods know what's going on, so they say to themselves, and then finally they say, through speaking through their leader Chakra to Subhuti, don't leave us out. We want to hear what this is. We want to know the meaning of Prajnaparamita. And implied is that we don't now know what this is. Please tell us. So therefore, in this opening to chapter 2, we have a significant development, I think, in terms of the cultural features of Buddhism and what Buddhism is saying to the traditional religious world of India. It's saying, yes, yes, we know about Indra and Brahma. We know they're very important. We know that Indra is Lord of the heavens. But we also know that he doesn't know Prajnaparamita. So let's see how the gods are going to be taught. As they listen, surprisingly enough, they don't get it. The gods think, even though we understand the meaning of the words and the language, we even know the language of the yakshas, that is the earth-bound deities that are not in the heaven, but they come from the earth. We can understand them. But what you, Subhuti, are teaching, wow, it's very difficult to understand for us. In other words, here are these great divinities in this chapter with their leader, Chakra, coming to Subhuti and saying, we don't get it. We don't understand what you're saying. We get the words. We know the words. We know the sentences. We can put those together. But what it means, we have the faintest idea. So Subhuti has to begin teaching them. He's teaching these powerful deities. And he does it not so much, they don't say it to him directly, they think it. They think, this is really hard, we don't understand what he's saying. And so Subhuti has the supernormal power, and he says, he knows what they're thinking. So now he actually speaks to them. And for the first time, the gods are going to hear a direct message about the Prajnaparamita. It comes as a great surprise, I suspect, to them when he says, within this Prajnaparamita, nothing is spoken. Nothing is shown. And nothing is heard. He's now expounded on the teaching about shunya, so-called emptiness. He's saying to the gods, you recognize and you say, we hear the words, we hear you teaching it, and we don't understand it. And then Subhuti challenges them. And this is the challenge of the Prajnaparamita. He challenges them by saying, nothing, I'm not teaching anything. Nothing is spoken. No wonder it's difficult for you to understand. Nothing is shown and nothing is heard. So you're having trouble. Of course you are, because you don't comprehend the way things are at this moment in this teaching process. So the gods are trying their best. And the gods who are dealing with this are the gods of two of the world systems or world heavens. The realm of desire, kamadhatu, that is the realm in which humans are born and die, and the form worlds, which are states of almost trance-like samadhi states in which the gods exist in the heavens. So these two gods of the desire and the form world now speak to the Buddha, not to Subhuti, but they speak to the Buddha. And they say, "O world-honored one, the profound Prajnaparamita is difficult to comprehend. It's difficult to understand. One should know that this person who is able to have confidence in the Prajnaparamita must have already made offerings to the Buddhas in their past lives. Otherwise, how would they have the power to even come close to understanding this?" This becomes a part of the Prajnaparamita. To say, of course, we have the situation of rebirths from the distant past. People who have long practiced, been in the presence of Buddhas, all of this in the past, so that these special people who understand this extremely difficult, this extremely obtuse doctrine which you're talking about, all we can think, say the God, is, well, in their past lives, they must have heard this many times. Otherwise, they wouldn't have an idea any more than we have. In a sense, they're saying, look at us. We're devas. We're divinities. And we don't get it. So you're telling us that ordinary humans can get it, can understand it? Well, okay. But they must have had lifetime after lifetime of being with Buddhas to develop this skill, because it is so difficult. And this is the interesting thing in these. The gods come into the Prajnaparamita text at chapter 2, and they stay until chapter 13, and then they leave. In those chapters, over and over again, they say, wow, this is hard. This is really, beyond comprehension. So that the text is reiterating and focusing on the fact that the gods not only think it's difficult, but even when they hear it being taught, they hear it being taught to arhats, to bodhisattvas, they complain. And so, as you follow along through the sutra, you have numerous examples of the complaint of the gods, how difficult this all is. Now, you would think that you wouldn't want to broadcast that what you're teaching is very difficult. But the reason for saying this is not to focus on the difficulty. Rather, it's being said to focus on the fact that these deities don't get it. These deities that you would think would have a message which would be of very great interest and value to humans, it's their difficulty, and it is making a clear statement that you don't depend on the devas. So Subhuti finally says, when the gods have complained so long, O world-honored one, Prajnaparamita is most difficult to comprehend, isn't it? And the Buddha said, Subhuti, of course it's hard to understand. And why is that? Because there's an absence of anybody to understand it. It's an incredible answer in many ways. Why don't the gods get it? Because they are not comprehenders. Nor is anybody a comprehender, because nothing is taught. Nothing is said in the sense that these gods think of it. And there is no one there to hear it. There's no comprehender. It's like we have the old thing, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there, is there a sound? If there's no comprehender, is there a sound? So when the Buddha has dealt with this issue, he makes an argument, or he makes a statement, which I think is very important for us to try to comprehend. And that is that when you say, I don't comprehend, and the Buddha comes back and says, understandable, because there is no I to comprehend. What are you talking about? What is this self that you're talking about being able to comprehend? This self that is momentary, fleeting. If you believe in this self, and if you feel that in order to have a comprehension of the Prajnaparamita, there has to be a self that is capable of comprehending it. But suppose you went a different route, and you said the Prajnaparamita and the difficulties which people face with understanding it is because they are trying to structure it in the way that they understand life. I am a comprehender. I am the one who experiences. I am the one who will understand this thing, this Prajnaparamita. And so, as we see in many Buddhist texts, they're constantly coming back to say, the minute you imply, I comprehend, you have already violated the nature of things as they are. Because you have already implied, I am something. And this I that I am is existing from moment to moment to moment. And this I that I talk about has a brain, and it is comprehending and dealing with information from moment to moment to moment. And yet this I that I'm talking about and this brain that I'm discussing has trouble with understanding what you're saying, because you're saying there's no I that's existing from moment to moment. Every moment of an I experience is a flash, like a lightning, like a bubble. And then it's gone. And then another flash, and another. And if you take all these flashes and you try to cement them together and make a continuous line and say, I comprehend, it's going to be really difficult, because it doesn't work. It is not the way things are. So the answer is exactly, I think, correct. To say, of course it's difficult to comprehend this if you think there is someone to comprehend. And there is a thing which exists moment after moment that is comprehended. So Subhuti says, the thing of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, full perfect enlightenment, the realizer, the comprehender, and the thing by which it is realized, the brain, the knower, and the thing by which it is known, all of these are empty. And what does that mean? Subhuti then again addresses the Buddha, O world-honored one. For this reason, full perfect enlightenment is easy to realize. Since everything that may be realized is the same as empty space. There's no barriers. There are no divisions. The way reality is its suchness, indivisible. It just is. And so, comprehending the full perfect enlightenment because of this emptiness, in one way, is very easy to be able to realize it. Once one can get on, as we said before, the great Mahayana, the vehicle which is emptiness, then the comprehension is easy. Because everything that I can experience is no different than empty space. Then Shariputra comes in. Poor old Shariputra. He's just not getting it. He just misses the boat. And he says, just a minute, to Subhuti. If this full and perfect enlightenment was easy to realize, wow, then there would be bodhisattvas as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River. These people who would comprehend it if it was easy, everybody would have it. But that's not the case, you know it, says Shariputra. Look around you. Do you see enlightened people as numerous as the grains of Ganges sand? I don't, you don't. So therefore, says Shariputra, the gods are correct. Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is difficult to realize, and only a few will ever attain it. So Subhuti has to address this issue about enlightenment. And Subhuti makes his comments to the Buddha. When Subhuti speaks to the Buddha, it's not to teach him, it's to verify and to have the Buddha, in a sense, recognize the truth of what he's saying. So he says, O world-honored one, as the Buddha has said, Prajnaparamita is most profound, and Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is difficult to realize. After all, Buddha, you did say that. But as I understand the meaning of the Buddha's teaching, what you meant by that is that Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is easy to understand. Why? What am I talking about? There's nothing to realize. And in the emptiness of things, there is no one who realizes full, perfect enlightenment. There's nothing to realize. There's nothing by which one could realize. All things are empty. Everything taught for the sake of abandonment, that is, of freedom, liberation, it's also empty. In other words, the Buddha says, yes, Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is difficult to realize. If you say, I must realize it, I, as the experiencer, must have this experience where I can say to myself, look at me. I have realized full, perfect enlightenment. If that's what you want, it's very difficult to get there. In fact, maybe impossible. Because, in fact, it's very easy. If I would just give up the idea that I am enlightened and say the I am talking about is empty, it's just a momentary flashing thing, then I would understand that it's easy to get to know the way things are. If you can just achieve this insight about emptiness, it's a piece of cake. But to the degree that you say, I am now trying to realize that everything is empty, very difficult, very difficult. That I that you're talking about doesn't exist in the way that you speak of it, way that I speak of it. So it's going to be really hard to get to where you think you want to be. So finally, the Buddha turns to these gods. They've been listening now for four chapters, and he says to them, if gentle sons and daughters hear this profound Prajnaparamita, yeah, they will swiftly reach nirvana. I'm not sure as I read the text whether or not the gods get it. That this nirvana which the Buddha speaks of, there is no one to attain it. But if people hear, and I think it means comprehend or understand, then nirvana is easy. Enlightenment is easy. None of it is hard because it's just the way things are. I make it hard. I make it impossible because I construct realities which are not real. And if I have a not real reality, I'll never be able to get to the reality itself because my construct is in my way. I built a barrier, and it's like a brick wall, and I run into it all the time because I think I think of what is happening to me. I think of what I am achieving. As long as I think that way, it's difficult. And it will remain difficult. But when the gods hear that those who hear this can quickly attain nirvana, as I say, I don't know why that satisfies them, but it does. And thereupon, the gods of the desire and the form worlds, these are not all the devas that there are. These are those special devas whose good karma has caused them to be born as gods temporarily, but the temporary can be eons of time. When they hear this, they're very polite. They prostrate their heads to the feet of the Buddha. They circumambulate the Buddha. And then they depart, withdrawing, pulling back just a little bit from the Buddha. Suddenly they vanish. And in vanishing, they have returned to their heavenly abodes. But when they return to their heavenly abodes, it's impossible to go from those abodes to nirvana. They can't do it. So it's like a failure, in a way, of the gods to truly comprehend. And yet, it seems as if they think, oh, well, that's good. I've heard enough, and I'm now leaving. I've finally gotten it. But they will have to live out their time. And one day, like a candle being blown out, they will vanish from that heaven and be reborn as a human. And at long last, in their human form, they will have an opportunity to achieve nirvana, to achieve the comprehension of the Prajnaparamita. So that's what we see in the text. Chapters devoted to these very powerful figures who may or may not have comprehended the true nature of the Prajnaparamita. If they did, then their complaints about it's too difficult will have been erased. If not, they will have to be reborn. They will have to go through perhaps many, many rebirths until they will finally comprehend this. So, thank you very much for listening today. I will see you again for Lecture 10. Best wishes. Goodbye.